Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Grateful. Let me start with macro thoughts. 3-month US Treasury Yield closes at its highest level since October 2008. I'm of the view that the Fed could surprise the markets with 4 rate strikes this year. Home thoughts: giant elephant Satao 2 is poached and killed in Tsavo, Kenya. This leaves just 6 super tuskers left in the world. A tusker is an elephant whose tusks each weigh in excess of 100 pounds. The tusks of Satao 2 weighed over 50 kilograms. The massive 44,000-kilometer Tsavo conservation area, twice the size of South Africa's Kruger National Park, is home to the highest population of large tusked elephants in the world, with 6 super tuskers of approximately 25 to 30 in the whole of Africa, and 15 emerging tuskers, young bulls who have the genes and potential to become tuskers. There are also 7 cows with tusks reaching the ground that are being monitored. Elephant populations in the area crashed due to poaching from the highs of 45,000 in the early 1970s to fewer than 6,000 in 1989. Since then, the population has recovered to 11,000, last aerial census in 2014, and there has been an increase in poaching since then. Take a look at this photograph I took of elephants crossing the Galana River in Tsavo East on Christmas Day, and then this photograph of sunset that same Christmas Day. We were in the Tsavo. The sky at sunset looked like a carnivorous flower, Roberto Bolano. And finally, another photograph of the Tsavo, wild white flowers. Sachi Gallery, who I caught up with on Twitter last night, we're celebrating self-expression with Huai. Submit your top Sachi selfie. I found this photograph of this couple quite arresting. Then another tweet: Mark Rothko died in New York in February. We are honoring by sharing the 1950s white center, yellow, pink, and lavender rose. Mark Rothko is truly an amazing painter. Finally, the great American photographer Ansel Adams was born in 1902. Enjoy this rarer color image he captured of a Death Valley sunrise. Political reflections: officials' first pieces of THAAD defense system aimed at taking down North Korean missiles arrive in South Korea. Things are heating up on that peninsula. Take a look at this readout of what President Trump said in his calls with the Japanese and South Korean leaders about the North Korean threat. According to KCNA, the missile launch was a drill for an attack on US bases in Japan. And then Spectator Index, rather tongue-in-cheek, said North Korea was sending threats against South Korea using a fax machine in 2013. Look, the bottom line is things are heating up on that peninsula. And we're dealing with 2 big curveballs: President Trump, very emotional, and North Korea, which is equally prone to emotional outbursts. Trump is practicing a pinball version of government, multiple metal balls ricocheting in all directions. This is the pinball reality of Washington nowadays. Multiple metal balls ricocheting in all directions, unleashed by an intemperate and lethal player-in-chief, all accompanied by a non-stop cacophony of bells, klaxons, and flashing lights. No one can hope to keep up, and no one can tell yet if the score He's piling up and spinning neon digits is impressively high or disastrously low. But to Trump, all that matters for the moment is the racket and the motion. So there we are then. This time Trump really blew it. His most trusted officials have been unable to contend that their boss had the faintest idea of what he was talking about when he made those tweets, which included the description of Mr. Obama as bad and sick. Most extraordinary were reports that James Comey, the FBI director, had asked the Justice Department publicly to repudiate them as pure nonsense less than 6 weeks into his first term. The law and order president has triggered mutiny from the very top of his most important law and order agency. Yet we can barely count the times we have declared with great certitude that Trump had finally crossed a line, only to find it had been drawn in disappearing ink. That Access Hollywood tape about Trump's boasting of sexual predation was the death of his campaign until it wasn't. So we must pull ourselves in check. Trump doesn't ignore the rules just because he likes to, or even just because he knows his supporters want him to. Nor is it just that he knows he won't get punished for doing it, at least not any time soon. His reasons for breaking the rules are often more complicated and more devious. With this tirade, for instance, he didn't just change the subject, he scrambled it. A trick completed when the White House asked Congress at the weekend to include consideration of the Obama administration breaking anti-snooping rules, including possible wiretapping of Trump Tower in its incoming investigations into possible Trump-Russia ties. Now, what has he done? So clearly there's been enormously close coordination between Trump and his people and the Russians. And this is like throwing Barack Obama a bone. Barack had something to do with it. Obviously, they were tapping the Russian ambassador. That Russian ambassador had a meeting in Trump Tower, which has not been declared by Jared Kushner. And I suspect the tape in question is coming from that origin, as it were. The full text of Trump's revised ban on travel from Muslim-majority countries is on rich wrap-ups: the White House, the Office of the Press Secretary for immediate release, executive order protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. I think it's madness. It's emotional, it panders to the base, but it has nothing to do with fighting terror. And then what to make of Donald Trump's early morning wiretap tweets? Well, what we know is that his daughter and his son-in-law are off the grid at the very time he tends to go stratospheric. Putin is quoted as saying, "I am the wealthiest man, not just in Europe, but in the whole world. I collect emotions. Our country is sick, Anne Juppé. For me it is too late, but it is not too late for France. By the will of God, we will conquer Rome," reads one mural painted on the wall of the tunnel against the background of a blood-red sun. RT Underground, Iran is currently a force of stabilization and security in the Middle East, said Illinois' Professor Beirut. Currency markets, let's go take a look. 105.94 euro dollar, dollar index 101.58, Japanese yen 113.86, Swiss franc 10011. The pound has been on a losing streak of late, 122.28. Aussie got a bit of a boost this morning at 0.7610. India rupee 66.605, South Korean 111.4807, Brazilian real 330.87, Egyptian pound, that's backed up. Remember I said take profit with a 15 handle. We're now at 16.8520, and the South African rand at 12.99. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. I think the Fed is going to surprise everyone this year with 4 rate hikes, and therefore the dollar index is a buy on retracements. Euro dollar, I think European pollsters are underestimating Le Pen and Wilders, in my opinion, and therefore the euro dollar is going to fall. Just to put things into perspective, Deutsche Bank, once in the same league with JP Morgan, is currently less than 1/10 of JP Morgan's market cap. That's from Holger. Gold, let's take a look at where that is. 1225.09, I'm bearish about it, looking for it to drop below 1200. Crude oil, last trading at $53.18 in New York. It's doing a bit of work around here, but I think there's potential for an asymmetric move to the downside. One of the rarest precious metals is on the best run in a decade. That's rhodium. Take a look at this chart from business. South African all shares up 1.67% this year. Dollar versus rand, I'll put up a 6-month chart. Let it push on a bit more in the 12s, but it will be a sell again momentarily. Egyptian pound, as I said, it was took profit below 16. Let's keep an eye on it now. Nigerian all share tumbled. It's now down 8.53% this year. Dangote Cement took a big tumble. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 10.59% year to date. And you will recall I did say that I was bullish about Ghana. L'Oreal innovates as it targets 100 million new consumers in Africa. Christine Palitza, the political side of humanitarian crises. Kenya uses the hunger crisis for land invasions. She's talking about Laikipia. South Sudan is to raise taxes. That's from $100 for a work permit to up to $10,000. My piece over the weekend, which got published yesterday, was where meteorology intersects with monetary policy. Difficult one to get out. About this time of year, many years ago, I would park myself on the veranda of the Mombasa Club. The Mombasa Club is next to Fort Jesus, and search for the sea breeze. Later, I would learn that I was in fact sniffing the sea breeze for petrichor, which is the earthy scent produced when rain falls on dry soil. The word is constructed from Greek petra, meaning stone, and chor, fluid that flows in veins of the gods. According to Wikipedia, some scientists believe that humans appreciate the rain scent because ancestors may have relied on rainy weather for survival. I like the idea that my sojourns to that veranda at the club tied me somehow to my ancestors, and from that time I've always been interested in the weather and meteorology, which is the interdisciplinary scientific study of the atmosphere. The study of meteorology dates back millennia. For those who are weather enthusiasts, the current drought conditions in East Africa is being caused by an obscure climate phenomenon called the Indian Ocean Dipole, the IOD. The IOD is an oscillation of sea surface temperature in the Indian Ocean. It wasn't until the 1990s the Japanese scientists discovered the Indian Ocean Dipole, a warm pool of water that migrates between western and eastern poles and affects atmospheric temperatures and rainfall. The phenomenon occurs in cycles of positive, warmer, and negative, cooler sea temperatures, but it has become more extreme in recent years due to climate change. A negative Indian Ocean dipole results in less rainfall over East Africa, and it is this that's contributing to the current drought that aid agencies warn could trigger mass famine. The scientists found that before 1924, the IOD occurred approximately every 10 years, but since 1960, IOD events have been occurring approximately 18 months to 3 years apart. Researchers suggest that global warming effects in the Western Indian Ocean have driven the observed shift in IOD variability, and note that the IOD has replaced the El Nino Southern Oscillation as the major driver of climate patterns over the Indian Ocean region. It is this negative Indian Ocean dipole which has parched the country and the region. What is clear now is that meteorology intersects with monetary policy, and at times with considerable violence, as we are witnessing now. Kenya's inflation jumped to 9.04% year-on-year in February from 6.99% a month earlier. the Statistics Office said earlier this week. On a month-on-month basis, inflation was at 1.72% compared to 1% a month earlier. That's a big asymmetric move right there. This moment is reminiscent of 2011 when a weather shock coupled with elevated crude oil prices and a slow-motion monetary policy response saw the shilling tumble to an all-time low of 107 against the dollar in October 2011. Interestingly, in 2011, we had our noses pressed right up against an election just as we do now. There is also political dynamic at work. Food price increases have a big outsized positive-negative well-being effect. Folks earning the minimum wage spend a higher percentage of their salary on food, in some cases as much as 50%, and therefore the food price rise amplifies at the lower salary point. I'm not ignoring those who are at the bleeding edge of the drought. They are in extremis. In 2011, GDP slowed over 1%. The economy is slowing, and this was further confirmed by higher frequency data. Market Stanbic Kenya Purchasing Managers Index dropped to 50.1, a record low since the survey began in January 2014, down from 52 in January. A reading above 50 marks growth. Private sector credit growth stood at 4.3% in December, the central bank said. Razia Khan, the Standard Chartered lead Africa economist, said this on Twitter: before you panic about Kenyan CPI, every single component ex-food is showing less than 5% year-on-year inflation, but food is 36% of the CPI basket. I'm of the view that for now this time is different to 2011. Firstly, crude oil prices are stuck in the $50 a barrel area compared to an $80 to $110 range in 2011, and crude oil remains the single biggest expense item for Kenya Inc. I'm also of the view that the shale boys in North America have OPEC over a barrel. Essentially, shale is able to turn on supply faster than OPEC are able to turn it off. It's a catch-22 for OPEC. So this crude oil development is soothing the inflationary move. Furthermore, the central bank governor has established his inflation-busting credentials and is very highly regarded by the markets. And therefore, I expect the governor to retain an optimal margin for maneuver in these tricky times, unlike in 2011. Finally, a big curveball remains the fiscal side, where we need to get a grip and get it soon. Infrastructure is uniformly good as long as all the money designated for these big flagship projects ends up spent on them, but it needs to be sequenced appropriately. Have a look at this photo I took of Fort Jesus, and on the right you can see the Mombasa Club that I was talking about at the beginning of that article. Earlier in the year, I wrote a piece called Connecting the Dots, Food Prices, the Weather in Laikipia. And unfortunately, the latest report is how it was too dangerous for armoured cars, slain Laikipia rancher's body not picked a day later. British ranch owner was killed by armed raiders in Kenya. The government has done little to stop the invasions, and with elections round the corner, few expect a vote costing action against the illegal grazers. Meanwhile, the ethnic logic of Kenyan politics means some candidates stand to benefit from a favourable shift in population dynamics ahead of the vote. Britain urges Kenya to restore order after the rancher is killed. The statement reads, I was deeply saddened by the murder of Tristan Vorshbury, a dual Kenyan-British national shot at Sosun Ranch in Laikipia yesterday. The British High Commission is in touch with his family to provide support at this difficult time. Alongside other international partners, I've repeatedly conveyed to the Kenyan authorities over the past months the United Kingdom's deep concern at the situation in parts of Laikipia. I have done so again following Mr. Vorshbury's murder. I welcome the clear commitment at the highest levels to tackle the situation and continue to urge the Kenyan authorities to take all necessary steps urgently to restore law and order and to protect life and property in the area. Kenyan tea is a reliable export, brews and market at home, is an article in the Wall Street Journal written by Martina. Nation exports more tea than any other in the world. But for years, Kenyans weren't able to enjoy a cup of premium tea cultivated in their own country. One company is leading a movement to change that. Kenya annually exports some 400,000 tons of tea, ahead of other leading producers such as China and India. But tea was widely viewed as luxury here. For decades, few Kenyans drank it, but 5% of Kenya's tea crop stays in the country, much of it dust and residue from higher quality leaves and processed abroad. In recent years, however, a locally produced premium brand has appeared shelved in supermarkets next to the $4 packs of Unilever PLC's Lipton and Associated British Foods Twinings, which are both made with Kenyan tea abroad and re-imported. Gold Crown Beverages Limited, a family-held business incorporated in the UK with a base here in Kenya's biggest port city, is selling premium black and herbal teas made by Kenyans for Kenyans at around half the price of foreign competitors. The company's Kenyan sales, $9 million in 2016, have almost tripled since 2012. That's interesting. Gold Crown has managed to establish a product that doesn't rely on exporting raw materials and importing processed goods, a feat that has long eluded most African companies. Cocoa producers in Ivory Coast and Ghana have for decades failed to produce a competitive brand of African-made chocolate. Oil producers in Nigeria and Angola have struggled to refine and process their own petroleum products. There exists, I said, an enormous blue sky opportunity to roll out higher quality tea like purple tea too. Kenya's domestic tea sales were $118.6 million in 2015, up from $70 million in 2010. That's Euromonitor, that's interesting. And then I like this, beyond black tea marketed under the Kericho Gold brand, the company sells Kenyan herbal teas such as mint and chamomile, as well as locally grown green tea for blended products. In October, Gold Crown launched Attitude Tea, a bulking, coloured, millennial targeted brand with blends called Hangover Tea and Love Tea. Interesting. Kenya shilling is at levels not seen since early January, 102.655. Nairobi all-share is marginally above a 30th of January low. It's down 8.93% this year. It's all about Safaricom. Kenyan minister opposes regulations to break up Safaricom. The government disapproves of measures that would stifle innovations. It wants companies to expand by investing in new products and technology, Joe Machero said in an interview. The country has existing laws that can be used to stimulate competition without having to introduce new regulations. Draft report by UK Advisory Group Analysis Mason, commissioned by Kenya's Regulatory Communications Authority, found that Safaricom is a dominant player in the mobile money and mobile communications sectors, and stated that unless steps are taken to improve competition, the company should be broken up. As the government, we do not support regulation that splits companies based on innovation. To say that any company that innovates something they're likely to be penalized by law, I believe, is unfair. I think he's right. And I wrote about this on the 27th of February when I spoke about breaking M-Pesa from Safaricom is a toxic thing. Safaricom is a buy at minus 12.27% year to date. NSE 20 is down 7.01% year to date. Thank you kindly for stopping by.